Broadcasting from Studio A here at Proven Winners ColorChoice Shrubs, it's the Gardening Simplified radio, YouTube, and podcast show with Stacey Hervella. Me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, today, Stacey, let's talk about peach. And I'm a little bit fuzzy as far as peaches are concerned.
Is that why you wanted to do the show? We just had that pun waiting. It's not come up on the show so far.
Would I do something like that?
I mean, if you had a pun burning a hole in your pocket, so to speak, I wouldn't put it past you, just saying.
Thank you very much. Well, the poor peach suffers from a bit of an identity crisis. You will see people calling it apricot, salmon, terracotta, even light coral, all words that describe the same range of colors. I know from experience, for example, with tulips, many of them that are what I would call peach are called apricot. And then you throw nectarine into the mix, and now, well, you have chaos. Think of the color peach and what pops into your head. If you remember the 80s like me, it's probably things like bridesmaid dresses and loose-fitting suits and jackets worn on the television show Miami Vice. But the color peach can be a garden problem solver. Peach is one of the freshest, most flexible colors you can incorporate into a garden design. So here's how I want you to think about it. I want you to think of peach as the tactful friend that keeps oversized garden personalities from acting out.
Ooh, that's interesting. I like my oversized garden personalities to act up personally. And I don't have a lot of peach in my garden, but this is an interesting approach.
Well, think about it. Peach is, in my mind, yellow and red and white blended together. And so the yellow and red kind of stand out, and then you throw in the white and you soften it. Not really pastel, but just kind of make it fuzzy, and you've got the color peach, and it's ideal for the garden.
I guess that's true. I don't have a lot of it, but I always do admire peach flowering perennials like geum. Always
yes.
A really good one for some beautiful kind of peachy orange colors.
I like that. Well, we'll give you some peach suggestions. Now, of course, the Pantone color for 2024 is peach fuzz. So I looked it up, Stacey, and according to the executive director there at Pantone Color Institute, she says, peach captures our desire to nurture ourselves and others. It's a velvety, gentle peach tone whose all-embracing spirit enriches mind, body, and soul. In seeking a hue that echoes our innate yearning for closeness and connection, we chose a color radiant with warmth and modern elegance, a shade that resonates with compassion, offers a tactile embrace, and effortlessly bridges the youthful with the timeless. Whoa.
Wow, all that from a color.
All that from a color. The color peach. Well, it's a mix of orange, yellow, and white. I misspoke myself. Really not red, yellow, and white, but orange, yellow, and white.
Well, there's red and orange. So I think you're... Yeah, I was thinking you're just doing the color wheel thing, not...
Yeah. But a softness to it. So I just think that it's one of those ideal colors to add sweetness and goodwill and joy to your garden.
So what do you have that's peach in your garden?
Well,
that's doing all this heavy lifting.
One of my very favorite peach-colored plants is a Proven Winners ColorChoice shrub, and that is Double Take Peach Quince.
Ooh, that is a lovely one.
That is a stunning, stunning color.
That is like the epitome of peach, really, in the garden.
It is. Rainbow Rhythm Orange Smoothie Daylilies. They call them orange smoothie, but it doesn't look orange to me. And I have a question for you, Stacey. We have walked through the trial garden before. A plant that I love is At Last Rose. I think it's one of the most incredible roses that you can grow in your landscape. My question for you would be, what color do you consider it to be? Is it apricot? Is it peach? Is it orange? What is it?
I would consider it, we usually refer to it as more apricot. So in my eye, apricot is more orange than peach. Or peach is a little bit like kind of lighter, has more white in it. And apricot has like a little bit more, bright orange to it. Not bright still, but like, just it's more orange and less white.
So at last you would view as being apricot.
Yeah, when we were playing around with the names for that plant, we were working with a lot of variations on apricot. They just didn't make the final cut.
Well, as it relates to the color peach in your landscape, I wrote a little limerick for you. Don't want something busy to make a scene, so distracting you'll need some Dramamine. Try a color that isn't demanding, that will provide a soft landing and always looks peachy keen. Life isn't all peaches and cream, but isn't it fun just to dream? Use soft color and fuzz, you'll be all the buzz and make a great Instagram meme. Oh, boy. This color, it's not overreach to say it's just a peach. You may disagree, but opinions are free. I'll exercise my free speech.
Oh, nice. I like that.
I like this color.
I mean, I do like it. I don't actually have it in my garden, but you know what? I don't have a lot of soft colors in my garden. I like bold color. That's my preference. But, as you were reading that, I was thinking of a plant that I actually really do love in peach is yarrow. A lot of the new cultivars of yarrow have that really beautiful kind of peachy color.
You're right. There is a Firefly Peach Sky Yarrow, light peachy orange flowers that age to yellow, which is very neat. And then, Stacey, a few weeks ago in an episode, you brought up a rose called Flavorette Honey Apricot Rose.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So that one is kind of apricot colored, but the reason that Flavorette Honey Apricot Rose is called that is because it actually was developed to have a taste reminiscent of apricots and honey.
Yeah.
Actually, ironically enough, if I had to characterize the color, I would say that Flavorette Honey Apricot, despite its apricot flavor, is more peach colored than At Last, which is more apricot colored. But if you're confused, we'll link everything in the show notes. You can sort it out. And, all of this is very subjective whenever it comes to color. And particularly when we are talking about colors based on the color of something else, whether that's orange or peach or apricot, all of which are things that have actual colors in the real world. So check out our show notes and you can tell us what you think is apricot, what you think is peach, and orange.
A new Proven Winners annual variety in 2024, which I think is really beautiful. It's a Calibrachoa, Superbell's Double Vintage Coral. That looks very peach to me. And then we've talked before about Agastache or Hyssop and Meant to Be Queen Nectarine.
Oh, that's a beautiful plant.
And it's peachy.
Yes, it is.
It's peachy. And begonias are fantastic for peach color. As a matter of fact, I have found through the years that if you want some really great peach color in your landscape, look to the bulbs, so to speak. Maybe they're not bulbs, maybe they're rhizomes or tubers. But when you look at begonias, you look at tulips, you look at cannas, you look at dahlias and daffodils. Yes, the peach color is just amazing. There is a Solenia apricot begonia hybrid. That's a new variety for 2024. Even caladiums get into the act, Heart to Heart, Chinook. And of course, you can't do a show on peach without talking about Superbena Peachy Keen. Wow, that is an amazing.
That is, the archetype of peach colored flowers, I think. And there are also plants with kind of peach colored foliage.
Yes.
Sometimes, especially new growth, can have a kind of orange. Sometimes you see this in our Midnight Wine or Midnight Sun, Weigela. You also see it a bit in our Double Play Blue Kazoo Spirea, just on the brand new growth. And in a plant that was featured in past plants on trial, Kodiak Orange Dervilla. So it is very orange, but when the foliage, the new growth starts to emerge, it can have kind of a peachy tone to it.
I love that, and I'm glad you brought up the foliage element, because some of the coleus you will see peach color, like in the Sedona Sunset Coleus.
Oh, I love that variety.
That is fantastic. And then, when you're talking about foliage, even some house plants, I've noticed aglaonema or Chinese evergreen, some shades of peach in there, and even poinsettias are getting into the act at Christmas time, right?
Yes, for someone who wants a little twist on the classic red.
There you go.
And they are very pretty.
Yes. So it's all peachy, my friends, and that's the topic of today's show. We'll see how Stacey ties it in coming up next in Plants on Trial. You're listening and viewing the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. The order of the day is peach, the color peach. And, it is interesting as you were listing all the sort of permutations of peach that all of these colors, over any other color, I think, are named after something else. So there's salmon, there's apricot, there's peach, there's orange. That doesn't happen with any other colors.
No, it doesn't. And before coming to the studio today, I looked in my closet thinking maybe I'll wear a peach shirt. I don't have one.
I had the same thought, and I also do not have a peach shirt, but I thought it was interesting that you brought up the 80s fashion, because I was in my aunt's wedding as a junior bridesmaid in the 1980s, and my bridesmaid dress was indeed peach.
Everyone, the bridesmaids were all wearing peach, and the guys were wearing mint green.
Oh, yeah, peach and mint green. That was like the thing.
That was the thing. I mean, even appliances, too. It was, oh, boy.
Now there's probably a lot of people out there who would love nothing more than some vintage 80s mint green and peach appliances. It has truly come around. But this is about plants, not the 1980s appliances. And, when it comes to plants on trial, of course, I had to pick a peach plant. Mm-hmm. And our absolute peachiest plant, Rick has already mentioned, and that is double take peach flowering quince, which is a beautiful spring flowering shrub. But it just seemed, unnatural to me to talk about a spring flowering shrub in the middle of August when there's so much else going on in the garden. No one wants to think about spring yet. They're getting ready for Halloween. And so I wanted to pick something that was a little bit more seasonal. And for me, the plant that I picked is Ringo All-Star Rose.
It's a beauty.
It is a beauty, and it's a very interesting rose. So I want to kind of talk about some of the things that make this rose so different. But first, I want to kind of give you a picture of what it looks like, as the name Ringo may start to imply. It's characterized by this central ring in the flower and color changes. So there are actually 4 roses in the Ringo series, the original Ringo, which is yellow and red. Ringo All-Star, which we're talking about today. Ringo Double Pink, which is a doubled version. And then there is Rise Up Ringo, which is a climbing version of the yellow Ringo. And all of these have a very distinctive red eye in the center. And the petals actually change color as the flower matures and ages. So you're actually getting a number of different colors on any of these plants at any given time. And Ringo All-Star, as you might have guessed, is the closest to peach. So when the flower opens, the outer petals are kind of like a deep pinky orange, shading to peach in the center, and then that bright red ring. But then as that bloom ages, what happens is that orangey pink goes to pink. The peach goes to what I would probably describe as a more accurate, because, peaches themselves are kind of actually a little bit yellow, especially if you have like a yellow peach. There's the white peaches. Those are more peach than the yellow peaches, which are yellow and peach. Wow, this is getting confusing. So true peach with a little bit of yellow there in the center as it ages, and then that red ring takes on some pink. And then as this plant, which does not need deadheading to flower all summer, goes on and blooms, you're getting all these flowers at all these different stages at once. And it really makes for a very interesting and dynamic show where you're going to get a lot of different colors at once. And that's a lot more interesting than,
Yeah, that's really neat. And I'm reading my notes here because this is not something I know, but you talk about a parentage being Holtemia?
Holtemia, yeah. So,
Holtemia. That sounds like somebody who wrestles in the World Wrestling Federation.
You know what? It would be a good name for a professional wrestler, and you are about to find out why. So, so this plant, the Ringo series, and other series that you might see out there that look similar with this very distinctive central ring, are developed from a rose known as Rosa persica. And that was originally known as Holtemia. So that's Hulthemia, Holtemia. And it is a true rose, but it used to be classified in its own genus of Holtemia. And Holtemia, or Rosa persica, is actually a desert rose.
Oh, native to Persia.
Native to Persia, as you might have guessed from the persica there in the name. Prunus persica, oh my gosh, synchronicity. Prunus persica is the scientific name for peach. So it's all coming together here.
Amazing how it comes together even on the fly, operating by the seed of our plants. Don't try this at home.
Exactly. So this is a plant that is native to very dry desert areas of Iran and Iraq and other areas around the Middle East. And if you were to see Rosa persica or Holtemia in bloom in those areas, you probably would not think that it is a rose in any way, shape, or form, even though the flower itself does resemble a rose, and it actually looks quite a bit like Ringo, just a little bit more wild. The yellow is much more deep, and the red in the center is very, very intense. The plant itself is actually kind of a sprawling, weedy subshrub, and the foliage is blue. So it's this beautiful, unique blue color. Spiny. The stems and leaves are quite spiny, with almost like a fishhook spine that kind of curves back in on itself. And then the buds are absolutely covered in spines. So like a little bit like a beach rose, Rosa rugosa, if you're familiar with that. But the spines are probably like an inch long. So this thing is saying to predators, stay the heck away. It's growing in the desert with a long taproot. Now, this is the straight species, mind you, not the Ringo or the ones that we're going to be growing in our gardens. And like I said, it is typically a weed that grows on the edges of fields. And I was reading that after farmers harvest their fields of whatever crop they were growing, they will then harvest any Rosa persica or Holtemia growing on the outskirts, and they use that for fuel because roses are actually very high in oil. And so they will actually use the fruits that have formed by the end of the season to make oil and use that for a fuel. So we'll put a picture of Holtemia or Rosa persica in the show notes, as well as in the YouTube version if you are interested in that. And you'll see the similarities, at least in the flower, but then you'll see that foliage and you'll be like, whoa, these are not similar at all. What's going on? Well, fortunately, Rosa persica is also very amenable to plant breeding. So it was able to cross very readily with other roses. And that's not always the case. Even closely related plants like this in the same botanical genus might not cross well because of their chromosome counts. Well, fortunately, Rosa persica is one of those that's just like, put me with whatever, I will make a new plant and we will resolve each other's liabilities and make something even better. And that's what happened with Ringo. So the person who did the hybridizing of the Ringo series is a brilliant rose breeder named Chris Warner in the UK. He has probably been responsible for around 80% of the roses in the Proven Winners brand. So if you have a Proven Winners rose, there's a very likely chance that it was developed by Chris Warner. Chris developed all of the Ringo series, and he is just a lifelong rose breeder who is just absolutely devoted to roses and to making roses more disease resistant and more beautiful so more people can enjoy them. He's really one of those kind of breeders who just wants to share his passion, and he knows that to do that, not everyone is going to devote the time and energy that they need to have really great looking roses. So he's like, I love roses, I'm just going to make them easier to grow, and then no one has an excuse not to grow roses.
And he did that with Rise Up Lilac Days.
Yes, so he is the breeder of Rise Up Lilac Days,
Nice.
which is Adriana's favorite rose. And in fact, I would say it's probably pretty much anyone who sees its favorite rose.
Sure.
It is so beautiful and so fragrant. You can actually see it in our rose video, which is available on our YouTube channel. But all of this talk about the parentage of Ringo All-Star rose, being from the desert, the one of the parents, it really says a lot about how heat tolerant roses can actually be. Now, this is hardy down to USDA zone 4, heat tolerant through about USDA zone 8. And because it does have that desert parentage, it is not a huge fan of humidity. So if you are in like a Mediterranean zone 8 or 9, Southern California, something like that, you'll probably actually have much better luck with this than someone who is in a humid zone 8, like in Georgia or Florida. It's really not going to appreciate being grown in humid conditions. So if you are trying to grow it, if you love this plant and it's easy to love, it's so beautiful, and you live in a hot, humid climate, I would say this is one rose you are going to want to definitely pay attention to the spacing on. It's going to be about 2 to 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide. So make sure you respect that and give it a good 1.5 to 2 feet on all sides. By giving it really, really good air circulation, you can help to reduce some of that disease pressure that might occur since this is not a humidity loving rose. And of course, fungal leaf spots do love humidity. So full sun, good air circulation, and you should actually get a really great performance out of Ringo All-Star or any of the roses, whatever color. If you're looking for peach, of course, that's Ringo All-Star. I think we've also described it as cantaloupe colored, if we want to just keep bringing the fruits into this. But take your pick, look at all of them. We will link them all in the show notes, and you can let us know which of the Ringos you like best.
Understanding the parentage, I appreciate that story, and it helps you in growing the plant or placing the plant properly also. I mean, that's great. I thought this rose was named after Ringo Starr of the Beatles.
Oh, it is.
It is?
Yeah, as well.
Oh.
And it has a ring in it. Get it?
Excellent. I knew more than I thought I did.
You sure do. So please take a look at gardeningsimplified.onair.com to check out all the pictures and additional information about Ringo All-Star and all the rest of the 320 plus proven winners ColorChoice shrubs. Right now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we've got the garden mailbag to open up, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where it's time for us to help you with your garden quandaries and conundrums. If you have a garden question, you can always reach us at help, HELP, at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, or just visit gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, and you can use the contact form to send us a message if you're watching on YouTube. You can also just leave a comment, and Adriana will let us know what that question is, and we will get back to you. You know, it is August. It is the middle of August, but it's funny how it seems like after the first week, it just like fall, it just turns into fall. Mm-hmm. Even though we're still technically 6 weeks out, or a good month out from true autumn, we're close to meteorological autumn, which will start at the beginning of September. And it's just kind of like, even though it's still summer and we're vacationing and it's hot, it's just kind of like everybody's brain starts turning to fall. And I've noticed an uptick in questions about things that are going to start becoming relevant in fall. And
I think it's because there's so much that happens in fall. Yeah. School starts, football, all this stuff. I think that's why it is.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have a question about what to do now, what to do coming up in the fall, don't forget fall is a marvelous planting time. Mm-hmm. Nurseries very often have sales. It's a great time to plant. Here in Michigan, we can easily plant through mid-October, if not later. And the warmer climate you live in, the longer you can plant. So start thinking about those changes that you might want to make to your garden as we move into fall. And actually, the first question today is a very fall-related question.
Yes, it is. Fall planted bulbs. Candy asks, hi, Rick and Stacey. I live in Wyoming Zone 4B5. My area averages 4 to 6 feet of snow, and it doesn't melt until springtime. I would love to plant tulips. Last year, I tried to plant tulips in a metal container because I have deer that eat everything in my garden, but they rotted. What am I doing wrong? I thought you could plant them in containers, or should I give up on them? Thanks for your advice. And
right.
You know, I would say for Candy, remember that many of these bulbs, like tulips, come from Mediterranean regions. And so drainage is so important. If you're putting them in pots, good drainage hole, lightweight soil in the pots. If you're planting them in the ground, good drainage, planting them at least 6 inches deep if they're tulips. And good drainage is one of the keys.
It really is. And you also have to plant them up at the right time. So you don't really want to necessarily plant them too early. If you're buying bulbs from a store, they're very often in the store earlier than you would ideally want to plant them. If you're buying mail order, they will typically ship them at the right time for planting. And, for you, Candy, since you are planting into containers, what I would recommend you do, is use containers with good drainage holes, and use fresh potting mix. And typically you're not going to get a lot of rotting issues in potting mix because it does naturally drain well. That said, there are definitely some other things that can go wrong. The plants do need to be left outdoors all winter. They need a cold treatment. So if they're not getting a cold treatment and they're getting watered anyway, they very easily can rot because they're not in active growth. So you want them to be dormant, and they can be out there. You don't even have to worry. I mean, obviously, if you've got 4 to 6 feet of snow, you won't be able to get them. But if you can have an unheated garage or someplace where you can put them where they're going to be easy to lift up and move indoors when you're ready, they're going to need, at least 8 weeks of those cold temperatures. And during that time, as long as they're cold, they're not going to rot.
And the roots are going to develop in the soil. So when we say cold, we're not talking about bone chilling, frozen like a brick cold. We're talking about chilled temperatures. So many times putting them into storage or in the ground, but seeing to it that they don't freeze solid is going to be one of the keys. And yes, drainage, so super important.
Yeah, so I would try it again. Just make sure, again, your containers are drained well, you're using fresh potting mix, and that you're putting them in a spot where you don't have to bring them in early. You can wait until all of that snow melts, but it is one of the reasons, the benefits really to forcing bulbs like this is being able to get those bulbs out of the outdoors, bring them in, and get that little early preview of springtime to get you through until it actually comes, especially if you live in a climate like Wyoming.
Shirley writes to us, hello again, wonderful hosts of a wonderful program. Well, thank you very much, Shirley. I have a 6-year-old healthy and beautiful ground spread juniper that I would like to move. Just wondering if I should cut it back first, and if so, how far? Also was wondering if you thought it might do well along my lakefront. Thanks so much. And, for Shirley, Stacey, often I recommend to people to cut back plants to when you're going to move them, to take some of the stress off the plant when you move them. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to. If it's an older established plant, yes. If it's a younger plant that's only been in the ground for a year or two, in many cases you can get by without it.
Sure. A lot of people don't realize that a plant's roots are in direct proportion to its top. So if you reduce the root room, or if you reduce the amount of roots it has by digging it, when you are going to, no matter how careful you are going to lose some roots. It would be impossible not to. So it's a good idea then to compensate by removing some of that top, because the plant isn't necessarily going to be able to support the same amount of top growth when it has less root growth to do so. But, you also don't want to do this at the expense of the overall aesthetics of your plant. And,
sure.
And pruning your ground cover juniper could be a little bit tricky. I don't know if you could feel like you can get in there and maybe just, snip out with some loppers, maybe a third of the oldest branches. That might work. If you're planning to maybe just shorten some of the branches, which might make it easier to dig. But I would definitely compensate, by taking off perhaps a quarter, maybe even a little bit more. Do your best. It's not really going to harm the plant as long as you're pruning in a way that's not going to change the aesthetics. But fall is such a great time for transplanting. And if you transplant at a time where you're still giving the plant a good 6 weeks of root growth, it's great because the plant systems are shutting down. It's saying like, hey, it's time for me to go dormant, but it's growing all of these roots still, and it doesn't have to worry about supporting all this top growth. It can really devote all of its energies to root growth, which is not only going to help it get through winter, but make a better start in spring. Now, if you can't do it this fall, next spring is also perfectly okay. You just want to do it early. And as far as growing on your lakefront, junipers are very, very drought tolerant, very wind tolerant. It can easily handle growing in an exposed area. So just make sure that you're giving it plenty of water as it settles in to compensate for all of that lost root.
We see many many junipers growing along the lakeshore of Lake Michigan, right there on the dunes, so they can handle it. And yeah, well said, Stacey. The air temperature cools down. We get natural rain, so top growth slows or stops, but that root growth is going to continue because that soil can stay nice and warm well into November, December. Shalonda writes to us, greetings. I planted purple coneflower from seed last year. Some of them came up disformed on the coneflower part. Others were normal and planted in the same area and next to a deformed one. Have you ever seen this? Do you know what's going on here? Thank you for sharing your expertise and humor. I hope I got your name right. I think it's Shalonda. And, I have seen this before on coneflowers.
I have seen it before, and it is a disease called aster yellows. So there's a couple of different things that coneflowers and anything in the daisy family can get, and that includes Rudbeckia. I mean, really any that you can think of are susceptible to this. So there are some mites, which is a tiny little insect relative that can feed on it, and that can look different. But Shalonda, from your photos, I would say this is a cut and dried case of aster yellows. Now, what surprises me, though, is that she grew these from seed. So aster yellows is a disease that is, it's called a phytoplasma, which there's your 10-cent word. Rick will have to make that a future word of the day.
You ever see the Ghostbusters movie?
I think that's ectoplasm, but very similar. And it's spread, it's sort of like a bacteria. It's not quite a bacteria. It's spread by leafhoppers. So basically what happens is the leafhoppers hop around from plant to plant. If they feed on an infected plant, and it could be somewhere in your neighborhood, it doesn't even need to be in your yard specifically, it will transmit this phytoplasma into your plant. So what I think probably happened, this was not an issue of the seed or anything that you did. Probably as the plants were starting to emerge this season, some of them got the leafhopper, and it fed on it and transmitted this disease. And, unfortunately, there is no cure for aster yellows, and it is recommended that any plant that is showing signs be removed and destroyed, because if you don't, it's just creating more aster yellows because more leafhoppers will feed on it and then spread it to more plants. So just because these couple of plants had it doesn't mean the others are going to get it. I have had aster yellows here and there in my garden, like on my silphium, which look amazing right now, and I love them. And I've just dug them and discarded them, and then it doesn't show up again. So it can be very, very localized like that. So I would recommend destroy these specific plants. At least you won't have lost your whole crop. And be vigilant. Look for it to possibly appear on other daisies. And if you see it, do make sure you're throwing it away. And if you happen to prune or use a tool, just to be safe, I would recommend disinfecting that with a full-strength Lysol or a bleach or something like that.
Use the search engine of your choosing. Type in aster yellows, and you will learn a lot and see a lot.
Yeah,
and thanks for listening and watching the show.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And I will put some links, of course, in the show notes if you want to do more research, but there's tons and tons of information out there. And once you see the pictures, you will see it is, again, a textbook case. So we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we have a special guest from Proven Winners Perennials, and you won't want to miss it.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. Today on Branching News, an interview with Laura Robles, Regional Product Manager from Walters Gardens, Proven Winners Perennials. And wow, a big reason for talking to Laura is to talk about a plant that I know we love very much, and that is Summerific Hibiscus. How can you not love Summerific Hibiscus? And what a great plant, an iconic landscape perennial during the month of August with its massive, wide flowers. Laura, thanks for joining us on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
This is a big time of the year for you, and Summerific Hibiscus has got to be, I'm going to guess, near the top as far as your most popular perennials. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right. We definitely have a ton of interest in it. People love the fact that it looks so tropical, but is actually hardy in this region and even down to zone 4. So, yeah, it's definitely one of our most popular perennials.
That's one of the things I like most about them is, we have Rose of Sharon, of course, in shrubs, and that's only hardy to zone 5. So a lot of people look at that and go, oh, I would love to grow that. Well, you can totally make it up with the perennial hibiscus, get even bigger flowers, even more color, and it goes dormant in the winter.
Yeah. It's a pretty spectacular perennial. And it's great, too, for lots of different applications in the garden. If people have like a wet area, it's a perfect plant to put in a wet area. It just thrives in that condition, but it'll thrive very well in clay soils, but then it'll also grow well in sandy soils. So it's a pretty adaptable plant. And
that's how I grow it. I haven't counted, but I probably have around 20 some total. I'm crazy about them. In my garden, I live, on very, very sandy area, very full sun. I don't give supplemental irrigation. So they don't get as big. Like when I go down to your trial gardens, I'm like, whoa, the potential in these things. But I'm perfectly happy really with their performance, even under less than ideal conditions, even if it means they only get to be, maybe 3.5, 4 feet tall instead of, the big, lush, amazing specimens that I see, there and in your photos.
Yeah, sometimes that's not a bad thing if they don't get to their full size. And we've actually taken our breeding program more recently to intentionally selecting for hardy summerific hibiscus that don't get quite as big, just because not everybody has a big yard where they have room for a plant that potentially could get up to 5 feet or 6 feet across. So some of our newer introductions we specifically selected to only get to be about 3 feet wide and 3 feet tall. So yeah, there's something for everybody, big yards, small yards. Even if people have a big yard, these smaller selections can be put, more near the front or middle of the border instead of way at the back. So some cool habits and colors and all of that stuff in our breeding work.
So when we talk hibiscus, Laura and Stacey, I'm going to have you help me out here a moment so that we don't assume that our listeners or our viewers have a good handle on exactly what a hibiscus is. There is some confusion for folks. We have the tropical hibiscus or Hibiscus rosa sinensis, which is a plant typically brought up from Florida in May and you sell around Mother's Day. And Stacey mentioned the shrub or tree form hibiscus, which we refer to as Rose of Sharon. Here, Laura and Stacey, we're talking about perennial or herbaceous perennial hibiscus. And we're going to take a shot at the botanical name here a minute. Hibiscus. And is it pronounced mosquitoes as in the insect? What is it, Laura?
That would be pretty cute, but it's actually Hibiscus mosquitoes.
There you go.
Okay, good. That's what I always say. But
mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes would be cute. Yeah,
that's a Spanish pronunciation.
Yeah, exactly.
But for our benefit, this is an herbaceous perennial that dies back to the ground in winter. And Laura, one more time for our listeners, what's the pronunciation?
Hibiscus mosquitoes.
Okay, Hibiscus mosquitoes.
Yeah, and you can actually find the species growing, out in the wild. There's some around here in West Michigan that I see periodically, and I've seen them in other places too.
Yeah, it's a native perennial, and I think a lot of people, when they see what it looks like, they assume it's from the tropics or from South America because it does look so tropical. And of course, plant breeding has brought out a lot of the characteristics, that make it much more ornamental than the wild form. But even the wild form is still very, very showy and really, really cool.
It is, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Dinner plate blooms now at Walter's Gardens, which is here in Michigan. Laura, when they are in flower over there, that must be quite a sight to see.
It is. It's pretty spectacular. We actually have them in a few different spots in our gardens here. So we do have them kind of sprinkled throughout the garden, like somebody might use in their own landscaping or gardening. But then we also have one bed that's entirely dedicated to the hibiscus. We call it our hibiscus hedge. And every single hibiscus in our program is lined out. And it's a great place for folks to see, the differences in height and color and bloom time and habit. So it's pretty neat to see that. And then what is really mind blowing is when they start to bloom out in our fields, because then, you just have like acres of beautiful, gorgeous blooming hibiscus. So it definitely beats looking at soybeans or corn.
You bet.
Not going to get an argument from us on that one. So
Nope.
I love that you do a hibiscus hedge because that's how I grow the majority of mine as well. And what works so well for me growing them, so I grow them as a hedge around my patio to provide some privacy. It's not like, I'm sure if they were able to reach their full size, they would give us a lot more privacy. But they provide some privacy, when we're sitting on our patio. But that patio I need to shovel in the winter. And I don't want a bunch of plants that I need to worry about breaking or anything like that. So for me, the fact that they go completely dormant, the fact that they emerge very late in the season, which is something that I think surprises a lot of people. They probably are pretty much the last perennial to emerge every year. That works out perfectly because I don't have anything there. I can pile the snow, pile the ice, not worry about it. And then the snow melts. And then, 4 months later, I'm in hibiscus heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can also use them, if it's not a location where you're going to be shoveling snow and don't want to break things, you can leave them up for the winter. So where I have mine located in my yard is not in a place where I am worried about damaging them. So I actually leave the stems up. I don't cut them down in the fall. And when the petals drop off, they leave the sepals oftentimes attached to the stems. And as you get into fall, as the plant goes dormant and drops its leaves, a lot of those little sepals stay attached and eventually turn brown, as do the stems. But it's kind of a nice winter interest plant, so I just leave mine up. And when we do get snow, even though it's not as frequent here anymore in Michigan, but, these beautiful little stems come poking up through the snow. And then I just cut mine down in the spring, before they start to emerge again, and away they go.
So let me ask you a crazy question about that, Laura, because I have been involved in conversations with people or in groups where this topic has come up and they have said, okay, you can't cut them in fall and leave the stubble because the stem is kind of hollow and they're going to rot out on you. So always cut them in spring, not in fall. That's a myth, right?
Yeah, that's definitely an argument that people toss around. There is a little bit of validity to, I'd say more so than the fact that they're going to rot. I would say the validity is that they tend to take a while to go dormant in the fall, and the longer you leave the stems up, the more of that energy from the stems gets pulled down into the roots and crown of the plant, which, helps to provide additional growth for subsequent years. So I think leaving them up is not a bad thing because you can get a little bit more energy down into the crop, but it's not like it's going to, rot or die if you do trim in the fall. I mean, I've done it before. I know a lot of other people who do trim in the fall. Stacey said she does, and, the plants are fine.
Yeah, and I mean, I have, again, super sandy soil, so it's so well drained. I definitely do not have to worry about, any rotting. And I do leave the ones that are actually in my perennial beds, and in my native plant garden intact. I don't cut those back. I only cut these back just because of the shoveling. And yeah, I do wait probably until after Thanksgiving. I'm a big believer too, in that you shouldn't really start messing with things until they go dormant, that, it gives the plant a huge opportunity to take in that bit of energy. And even if it's not a make or break thing, it's just kind of a best practice. You might as well if you can do it.
Exactly. Yep.
Now, Laura, one of the benefits, there are many benefits to this plant. Obviously, the dinner plate blooms, but when you're planting a summerific hibiscus, would it be correct to say that here in North America, you're planting a native plant? Is that correct?
Yeah, the species Hibiscus mosquitoes is definitely native. In its native kind of environment here, it tends to grow in more swampy conditions. And the blooms tend to be pink on a lot of the specimens out in the native areas here. And, some of them look a little bit different than the hybrids that we've created. But yes, it is a native perennial.
The available color in the hybrids is just amazing. Give us an idea as far as Summerific Hibiscus is concerned. How many different varieties do you have? What kind of colors are we talking about?
Yeah, so within the Summerific series, we have a couple of kind of subclasses. So the typical habit of the Summerifics that we select for is kind of a mounded gumdrop-shaped habit. But then we have a few varieties that are a little bit more narrow and upright, and we call those the crush. So within the Summerific series, if they have crush in their name, like Candy Crush or Valentine's Crush, those tend to be a little bit more narrow habit, more columnar. In the crush, we have Candy Crush, Lilac Crush, and Valentine's Crush, if I'm remembering correctly. So we have three, and those are a pink with a really dark, almost black eye, a nice kind of lilac color, and then Valentine's Crush is a red. And then in the remaining gumdrop type Summerifics, we have anything from one of our brand new introductions that will be able to be found at retail in spring of 2025. It's called Cookies and Cream. And that one is a pure white, no red eye, with dark, almost black foliage. We have several different variations of pink. Some of them have kind of a pink and white pinwheel pattern to them. We have a nice dark red called Holy Grail that again has that dark, almost black foliage. We have other reds that have green foliage. We have one called French Vanilla that is kind of a creamy yellow. And we're actually working on some future selections that hopefully will intensify the yellow coloration. So yeah, there's just all sorts of colors, and I think more to come in the future. We definitely have some other colors that we're going to be trying to bring into the series in the future years. So stay tuned for what we can do. I don't put, there's hardly anything that I would put past our breeder being able to do. If the genetic background is there for him to do it, he will make it happen.
Well, I do. If you have a quick second, I have to tell this story. So I've always been crazy about perennial hibiscus. One of the first things I planted when I actually had my own garden. But, working in the industry, I would always get free plants, and I would try to give them to people like my mother-in-law, and she would always just politely decline, no, I don't have space for that. I don't have anything in my, no, thank you. Take it home. You should have it. That kind of always declined. But she loved playing Candy Crush. And so I was able to get a Candy Crush from you guys. And I'm like, I'm going to take it to her and I'm going to tell her, if you don't want it, that's totally fine. But I couldn't resist giving this to you with this name. And her eyes just lit up. She was like, it was the first plant she ever actually accepted from me as a plant gift. And they planted it, and she fell head over heels in love with a hibiscus. Like, just after she saw Candy Crush bloom in her yard, she called me up and she said, how many more can you get me? And what other colors are there? I mean, it was just like that one plant just completely made her an addict. And so I gave her, I think, 3 or 4 other colors, and she planted all of them, and they just loved them. And unfortunately, she did pass away. But for me, I love that I have that connection. And when Candy Crush first blooms, which actually my first Candy Crush blooms just appeared this week, it always brings a little tear to my eye and just like a really great memory. And, it's just one of those things. I'm just so grateful that you guys gave it that name and that I was able to have that connection. And it's just one of those things you never really know when you put something out into the world, how it's going to actually impact people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great story. And sorry about the loss of your mother-in-law, but hopefully she was able to enjoy it.
Oh my gosh.
Time before that happened.
And now my father-in-law loves them and looks forward to them blooming every single year. But every single year he does this. Calls me up in May. Those plants are dead. Those plants are dead. Are you sure? I said, no, they're fine. They will start growing. And then he'll call me up. Okay, they started growing, but they're really small. Are you sure they're going to be okay? I'm sure they're going to be okay. And then, of course, August rolls around and it's just, back to that incredible abundance. And honestly, watching that transition from this tiny little shoot at the end of May to just this, boffo, huge plant with enormous flowers is like, I don't know. It's just one of the things that I like most about perennials in general, but especially the Summerific hibiscus.
Yeah, they have such a quick growth rate. I mean, when you consider the fact that they are one of the last of perennials to emerge, just how quickly they go from, nothing to 5 or 6 feet on some of the tallest varieties. They're so fast.
It's so cool to see.
Yeah, here in the north, the epitome of a late bloomer, but when they bloom, it's magnificent. Laura, for folks who want to learn more about Summerific Hibiscus, where do you suggest they go?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good information on the internet. There's a lot of great information on the Proven Winners website. And then we actually have a consumer-facing portion of our website called Perennial Resource, and that's another great place where they can learn about the Summerific Hibiscus.
And what website is that, Laura?
That is just perennialresource.com.
Okay.
We'll link to that in the show notes, too, for anybody who wants to hear, because that is a great website, not just for Summerific, but for all sorts of perennials. I rely on that website quite a bit myself.
Yeah, it is not just hibiscus on either that or the Proven Winners website. We don't have a specific to hibiscus website, but yeah, either of those are great resources for hibiscus and anything else that they want to research on perennials.
And I mean, the other thing is you don't need a ton of knowledge to grow these. I mean, sun, space, water, watch out.
Yep, they're pretty easy. Once you get them planted, they just kind of take care of themselves, and they're not too bad.
Fantastic. Thanks for what you do, Laura, and thank you for spending time with us.
I need to know what Laura's favorite Summerific hibiscus is.
I would like to know that, too.
I was waiting for this question. I was assuming that this was going to come out. So I do have actually a quick answer, which isn't always the case, but my favorite Summerific hibiscus is actually Edge of Night.
Oh.
So that is a variety that we introduced probably 2 or 3 years ago now into the program. And it was kind of the first of our more compact types. So it will get up to about, I'd say 3.5 feet, 3.5 to 4 feet in width and height. And it is a gorgeous kind of bubblegum pink flower on the darkest, closest to black foliage of any of the varieties in the series so far. So just that color contrast between the pink and the black, it's just spectacular.
All right. I don't have that one in my collection. I'm going to have to add it.
And it's a great point.
You need to get that one.
It's a great point that, all the attention is towards these dinner plate blooms, but the foliage can play a starring role too.
Oh, it really does. I have 3 of that one planted in one of my beds on like the far back side of my yard. And I'm definitely a big foliage person. Like in addition to flowers, I like to mix, varying shades of purple and black and silver and chartreuse into my landscape. And those hibiscus look amazing from day one, as soon as they emerge, because they have that dark foliage and it's just like a nice focal point in the landscape. And then when they start to bloom, it's even better. So yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. Well, a pleasure to talk to you, Laura. Thanks for everything that you do, and thanks for sharing the enthusiasm that we share with you for Summerific Hibiscus.
Yep, absolutely. It was a joy being on your show.
Thank you, Laura.
All right. Well, I don't know about you, but I am awfully glad I get to go home and spend the day with my Summerific hibiscus here in the height of summer. So thanks so much to Laura for all that great information. Thank you, Rick. And thanks, Adriana. And thanks to all of you for listening. We really appreciate your support and hope you have a great week ahead.